Literacy Plan PROPEL. What you guys will notice this year that a lot of our work will be driven by your local literacy plan, which is supposed to be mirrored from our state literacy plan. So we thought it appropriate to end our last COP for this year with some clarity and a better understanding of our state literacy plan PROPEL. It is also going to guide a lot of the work at the June 9th retreat, which I do want to thank so many. We have 80 people registered. It is going to be an incredible day of grant camaraderie, grant learning. And so we're excited to see you all on June 9th, but even more excited to have you here today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and hopefully be mindful of your time today. So thanks for being here today, Melissa. We're so thankful for you.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm so glad to see all of you today. I know that you are doing some wonderful work with this grant and really turning things around. So one of the things that we wanted to address was our statewide literacy plan. You know, we can't go anywhere without a plan. Many of us are still of an age before cell phones that I remember moving to Kansas City in my 20s and getting the old map out and just trying to wander around figuring out where I was going. And I could spend a whole day with that. But without a plan, I did not know where to end up. So one of the things that we know we all need is an idea of where we've been, where we're going, and how do we know when we get there? And that's what a plan is meant to do. So if we don't have that, we tend to wander around lost in the wilderness, wondering, okay, what next? What should we do next on our next PD day? We don't have any idea. So that is the reason for why we do have a literacy plan, because we need that coherence as a state to be able to know where we are going. So at the same time, you need to be able to have that plan in your district to be able to know where you're going. We have a lot of stuff going on with these different initiatives that we're doing. There is so much coming at us that it can get very easy to get lost in the initiatives if we don't have an idea of where we are going. I figured it might help if I share my screen. We all know how that can be sometimes. All righty. And then let me play that from the start. Would one of you confirm that you can see my screen? Yes? Okay, thank you. All righty. So as we are moving on, we really just wanted to talk about that importance of a plan. You know, we've got a great opportunity right now in Oklahoma. We have a lot of things coming down with us. We know where we stand, we know where we've been, and we really do have an idea of where we want to go. There's a lot of changes coming at us, and how we react to those changes is really up to us, whether we see this as an opportunity or as a burden. What we're trying to do up here at the department is really see this as an opportunity, a way to be able to move forward and to fix the things that we know could be made better. So we know that we are moving towards some greater statewide coherence in literacy. As we said, there's a lot going on. We have the Strong Readers Act, which focuses really just on K through 3. We have the early childhood with OPSR, with the Dolly Parton Library. We do a lot with our adolescent literacy that's coming in. We have MTSS, we have numeracy bills that are now coming up. But these all do fit together. And if we don't work together or make those connections, it can feel very disjointed. So PROPEL is providing our framework within which we can work with this. In your local literacy plans, that's where this vision really becomes implementation, because we can put whatever we want on paper, we can have whatever laws we need on the books, but how it is actually enacted in your schools and in your classrooms is how this actually will affect the students in our state. So your local literacy plan really is going to communicate who you are as a district, what your district believes about literacy, and how your district is going to move forward as we keep going. So I have a question for you, and I'd like you to respond in the chat with either a 1, 2, 3, or 4. If someone in your community were to come and ask to see your district's literacy priorities, where would they find them? Are they clearly visible and regularly communicated? Do they exist internally? The staff knows what they are, or maybe the leadership knows, but they're not really there publicly for parents or business partners. Are they embedded in multiple plans, or are they still being developed? So I see a couple of responses, a 2, maybe a 3, a 1, clearly visible, regularly communicated, a 2, a 2 or a 3. Yeah. So which tells me we have an idea of where we want to go. We know what we want to do, but maybe it's not coming out as much sometimes when we're going beyond the staff meeting. And I know that that has been my experience in working with several schools and being a teacher in several schools as well, is we would know, we would work around it, but then um, it wasn't necessarily embedded into a part of our instructional day where it guided all of our thinking. It was, if it's the topic of this staff meeting right now, we're going to address it, but otherwise it just wasn't forefront in our mind. So our challenge then is to move up to that one part where it's not only clearly visible and regularly communicated beyond our staff, but also just embedded in our thinking of a part of what we do. And that's a pretty lofty goal. So I hope no one feels badly if they are not completely there yet, because we all have ways we can continue to grow. But it gives us an aim to shoot for. So, but I love that I don't see any 4s, that we do have an idea of the goals that we do want. And I'm sure that that is attributed a lot to the work with our CLSD group. So moving, let's see, I believe I hit the wrong one. Hang on. Technology issues in the morning. All right, so when we talk about PROPEL with our local literacy or with our statewide literacy plan, this is not just another initiative. We've had this around for quite a while. This has been guiding, but at the department, we have been in the same situation a lot of you have been in your schools. We've known about it. We've talked about it. We've embedded it into a lot of plans, but we have failed to communicate this to schools and to partners to really make this a part of what we're doing. So that's what we're trying to move to now. You all are just the first lucky recipients of this conversation, because we will have several throughout the summer. This is not a checklist. This is not, okay, I can do this. I've got this, check. I can do that, check. It's really meant to be more of a framework for coherence. Coherence is a topic that's been around in education for a very long time. And it's still something we struggle with, because we do tend to get very siloed in what we do. So this is a way of how we can make those very visible and explicit connections to say there is a purpose behind some of these things, and this is the framework for what we're doing. So PROPEL was going to help us connect those initiatives into a coordinated literacy system rather than isolated programs. This is one of the reasons where if I have a wonderful teacher in my school and they just say, I'm going to go in my classroom, I'm going to shut the door and do my thing, that is not going to benefit your school, because no one else in your school is benefiting from that wonderful teacher's knowledge. We have to be able to have a connected system. We have to be able to work together. So, because these kids are not just working with one person throughout their school career, they go from person to person to person, to school to school to school, program to program to program. And if they aren't seeing the connections, if the adults aren't connected, those kiddos are not going to have that connection they need either. So it's on us as the adults to be able to make those connections for the kiddos, to make this as the best possible program that they can have and learn from. So when we look at a local literacy plan, that really is your literacy identity. This is when we say, what is it that you believe in literacy? This should be the first thing that everybody goes to. When we're looking at those strong literacy plans, thinking about that these provide direction. We have to know where we're going. If we're coming up of, we've got a professional development day next week, what are we going to do? We should already have a plan laid out of where are we wanting to get to and how can we most effectively use our time. Should be aligning our goals and our initiatives. You know, we have a lot of things going on, not only at the state, but even at the local level. It might be some different programs that you have going on in your school, and how are they meant to work together to improve literacy in your school? Reflecting your district values. We all have a mission statement, a vision statement. We know what our values are, whether they're set by our building or by our local boards. But we know that we all, in some form or fashion, want our kids to be able to leave our schools with the knowledge that they need to be successful if they choose to do so. We need to be able to connect literacy work across departments. So not just by grade level, but if we have a departmentalized situation in one or more of those grades, from the English department to the math department to the social studies department, not to say that math and social studies teachers are also reading teachers, because they have a very important curriculum themselves. But literacy does weave its way into every single subject, even if it's understanding the vocabulary or being able to understand the text that is read or being able to communicate about what they have discovered in that content area. And so making sure that those things that are applicable across all content areas, that all of those teachers are aware of and can meet effectively. Grounding our decisions in data. You know, we are so data rich that we are sometimes drowning in it and don't know what to do with it. I know that when I was talking at a district PLC a few years ago, they said, yeah, we've got all this writing data. We collect writing samples 3 times a year. Great. What do you do with it? Well, we collect it and we put it in this folder. Okay, but how are you using that to inform instruction? Well, we pass it on to the next teacher so they can see how they've done. So if we're not using that data, it's really that compliance check. We've got it in a nice little folder, but it's not doing anything to improve our instruction or to improve the learning for our students. And then it communicates priorities clearly, not only to our fellow educators, but also to families so that they can be involved. I know that having that family engagement is a real challenge sometimes, but sometimes we also have families that just want to know, how do I get involved? What do I do? What do I need to do? And maybe that involves not coming up to the school, but how can I help with my kiddos at home? We know we won't reach 100% of our families. That is just the reality. But having a way to make it more of the culture of our schools to be able to reach out to families and know where they can help fit in and work, not just with receiving information, but also to give information for us to consider, is a really important goal to be working towards. So as we're looking at this, we don't want this just to be another compliance check, because compliance checks really don't do anything for us. We want this to be our identity-driven plan. So if this is just a compliance plan, you're going to find it listing a bunch of activities. We're going to do this family night in October. We're going to do this carnival in March and talk about reading. And we're going to do a Dr. Seuss week. Instead, we want it to define the direction we're going. How are those activities giving us that direction? We don't want this just focusing on requirements. We see a lot of this with strong readers because there are just a lot of requirements within that. And if it's just, okay, well, they've got a plan, they've got a slip, well, we've done this report. But if we're not focusing on the outcomes with that, that's why those things are there. And so it's really looking at beyond the checklist of requirements and what is the purpose? Is this meeting the purpose of that? And the purpose is always, how can we make this better for our students? Having a lot of separate initiatives listed rather than connecting them together into a system. How do they work together? We are on initiative overload most of the time. And sometimes it's looking at, this is something we've always done, but it does not fit into our system. Let's de-implement this and give us a little bit more time so that we are not just completely exhausted. What is it that really matters as we're moving towards our goal? And then finally, this local literacy plan should not be a hidden document. It is really a visible community commitment. And one of the reasons why it's really important that we do also have families as part of this so that they can also have input in there and be aware of where we're going. So, as we are connecting those local plans to strategic priorities, Emily, would you be able to drop that link into the chat for us so that we have an overview? And I know you have talked about in some of your former meetings the PROPEL plan, and we do have a link to that in your folder so that you can see it. It is a hefty document. So we have made an overview of just to give a two-page quick what does this mean for each of those 6 pillars? But what this is meant to do is making those connections across the system. I really do firmly believe that the best way we can move literacy forward in Oklahoma is really by making a lot of those connections. We have wonderful things going on. We just haven't always fully connected all of them yet. So I want you to think for a moment and just jot down, because I'm going to give you a little bit of think time, about your district goals that you have already set. How are those connecting to instruction? Are they about, are the goals listing specifically instructional moves? Or are they tied just to a test score and we don't have any goals or ways that we're going to improve instruction itself? How do your district goals connect to professional learning? We have very limited time for professional learning, giving all the things that we need to address, because we know that literacy is not the only thing out there. But we need to make sure that we're using that time and every minute of that time to its best possible ability, whether it's through a staff meeting, a professional day, or PLCs that we are meeting with on a regular basis. How do district goals connect to a multi-tiered system of supports? We talk about MTSS, that really is the framework within which we do school. And Propel is how we make our content stronger within that MTSS framework. But it does not happen one without the other. Screening, we know that screening is required for all students K through 3. I know that all of you are using Amira in some form or fashion as part of the CLSD grant. So how are we utilizing that data to understand which students are at risk and which students might need more assistance and which students are ready to be challenged a bit more? With intervention, what does intervention look like? Am I intervening on the majority of my students? And if so, we know it's not an intervention problem, it's a tier 1 problem. And we need to really be looking at our core instruction, because intervention should be in addition to and supplemental for those students who are not able to be successful with what we're doing in the classroom. But we need to make sure that what we have available to them is very explicit, very prescribed, and that we're following that with fidelity. How are we doing with family engagement? What are our goals around family engagement? Do we just invite them in a couple of times a year? They come in for conferences and that's it? Or do we have a way to communicate with them? Is all of the communication going one way? Or are we also finding ways to receive that communication and do something with that feedback? And then finally, and this is really, we've saved the most important for last, the leadership priorities. As leaders, you are the helm of the ship. You are the ones making everything go in the same direction. And if our leadership priorities are not where they need to be or are not clearly defined, it's like watching a bunch of baby spiders going out in all different directions, and they're all going to be very, very busy, but it will not be an effective system. And so as the leader, whether it's as the principal or you've been placed over the lead of the grant or the literacy leader in your school or district, but we can have leaders in a lot of different ways. Sometimes we have a leader who is just a teacher that everybody looks to. but having all of the leaders aligned and moving in that same direction and making sure that everyone's aware of those priorities is essential in getting everything moving forward. Let me pause for a minute. And Emily, Paige, Tyler, are there any questions, comments in the chat that we need to be aware of?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you. Feel free to drop those in there because we will pause periodically so that we can address those. Okay, so we are going to talk about those 6 pillars of our PROPEL plan. The first one being purposeful leadership. We have that first very intentionally. We know that without that purposeful leadership, we are not going anywhere. We are going to keep just spinning our wheels in the mud. A strong literacy system requires that aligned leadership, and it's going to provide clarity, direction, and sustained focus. That plan should outlast any person in that building. So that if somebody were to leave at the end of the year or something were to happen, the school can still move forward. If it hinges upon one person, it's not sustainable. And that also goes with just having, it's how we do business. As a state agency, we have an elected leader that comes in every 4 years. We know that we're dealing with change constantly. So we try to put very defined systems so that we are not undergoing a major overhaul in how we do business at the state every time we have a leader comes in. They always will put their own touch to things. That makes perfect sense. And we might have some focus things that they really want to have there. But as far as our systems that keep us going, that is a sustained system that is there, that when everyone is bought in and aligned, thanks to the leadership of that organization, then it keeps moving despite who comes in or goes out. So leadership really determines whether literacy initiatives become temporary programs or if they are lasting systems. So I would like for you to take a moment, reflect, use the chat, discuss. Can educators across your district clearly articulate your literacy priorities?
Mm.
And I don't care if anyone comes off of mute to talk or not. And my wait time is really good, by the way. I'm not afraid of it, so I'll wait till someone responds.
Okay, I'll tell on us.
Great, Carrie.
I feel like the leadership and then the people in on the grant are really focusing on the literacy initiatives because it's like our job. And but if you went in a teacher's classroom, I don't know. I don't want to say no, but I'm going to say I don't know.
I think that's a really fair answer, and a very honest one, and one that is probably most people's reality.
I would agree with that as well. Being at central office, but then going into some of the classrooms for literacy, you're not always seeing those initiatives that you try to put in place.
Yeah, thanks, Ginger.
I think that we have a great leadership team that is working in that direction. I do think the teachers, they understand our initiatives, but they also are getting sometimes confused with, okay, here's MTSS, here is benchmark testing, whether Amira or NWEA, here's, it's just a lot of different things coming quickly. And now we're going to face new changes. It just gets a little confusing sometimes, and trying to help make that, I think it's important for leadership to help make that as simple and explicit as possible for those teachers.
Sherry, I really appreciate you pointing all of that out. I don't know how many times I've talked to teachers. They say, well, I do this for strong readers and I do this over here for MTSS, and not understanding that they really do work together and the same thing. But our teachers are so swamped with just trying to deal with everything on a daily basis in their classrooms that they don't have time to draw those connections. And so you are exactly right, Sherry. It really is beholden on the leaders of the building to make those connections. And even at the state, we are trying to do a better job of that as well, of making those connections for people to see that this is how this is going to strengthen the system already in place. It's not just a whole new thing. It's one component of a system already here. Are there any other thoughts about if educators across your district can clearly articulate your literacy priorities?
Hi, Melissa. I think that on the elementary side, and most likely, absolutely, okay, if I'm being honest, maybe
Yes.
half of my middle school, we are down, and we are seeing most definitely early childhood, you fly all the way through, even in some
Mm-hmm.
of my third grade classes. Well, I've seen one where they are utilizing that, especially with students that are missing those components. But in my high school, I feel like, because uh, personal opinion, I
That's
feel
fine.
like
This is a
because
safe place for that.
yeah, everything is self-contained. It's
Yeah.
almost like it doesn't, where we have really tried, the leadership has tried really, really hard to, if you can read, you can do anything. But if you
Mm-hmm.
cannot, then band is going to be difficult. Art will be difficult. Math will be difficult. And so trying to also with MTSS, help them understand. Like, I can tell you right now, we have hit them hard. So every teacher I have on campus, they know what MTSS is. They
Yeah.
understand what tier 1 is. They understand what tier 2 is. But where we have difficulty is that, so like in my band room, making it look the same across the district, not just in the elementary or in the middle school, but also in high school, because and I will have a new chemistry teacher this year, but making certain that that chemistry teacher is providing multi-tiered systems of support inside of the chemistry class. And maybe that
Right.
doesn't look like reading, but specifically it looks like what they're doing inside of chemistry. And maybe they won't be pulled for a tier 3 chemistry, because I don't know that there will be anybody else that will be able to assist them with chemistry. But
Right.
making certain that our multi-tiered system of support um, is the same district-wide, and that people understand that tier 1 and tier 2 is the responsibility of the classroom teacher. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all of my people know this, but it's really getting those people that are not in those core classrooms to help carry that over, because not only do my teachers have to do that, my students have to understand that it
Right.
will be fluid. They'll come in and out of those 2 tiers in specific. But I'm excited about that everybody knows MTSS.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows the tier 1, tier 2. It's just getting those people, my high school in specific, to be on fire and make those practices not in every single class, not just in the.
Sure. And Jillian, thank you so much for sharing. I think that is a really great distinction too of, we've got a lot of focus and we've had a lot of focus for years at the elementary level. And just by the way that elementary schools are structured, they do tend to be a little bit more cohesive. Whereas the further you get in that education, they get deeper into that content. It's like when you get, we joke around here of whether you are a really detailed thinker versus a big picture thinker. And when you're that detailed thinker, you are focused right there. And we need those kinds of people, absolutely, to get deep into the weeds. I tend to be more of the big picture part. And then I have people reminding me, yeah, you got to deal with these details down here too. So it's a lot of times, though, when you are so far into the weeds on something, it is really hard to see how does this thing over here connect to me? And so I do think that that is the next challenge. And I think that's not only for you at your schools, but also for here at the State Department as we are trying to make more of those connections. There always been a pretty strong divide between elementary versus secondary, or between gen ed versus sped, or those kinds of things. And so really trying to break down those barriers as well, so that that cohesive message is being sent out. So, okay, I want to move on to another our next pillar, which is that research-based resources. We know that high quality instructional resources really do create consistency, reduce variability, and strengthens that tier 1 instruction. The biggest cuss word you could probably say to me right now is teachers pay teachers. So I know there's some great resources on there. I will not deny that. However, when everyone's going off and doing their own thing, even if they're doing something amazing, but we do not have that consistent education for all students, and we cannot guarantee that every child has the same consistent opportunities for learning, then we're doing our kids a disservice. Their education and their success should not depend upon whose classroom they are assigned to. We should all have a system working together so that our novice teachers who may not be as well versed in some of these areas can work with our more experienced teachers who have that benefit of knowledge, but also might benefit from our novice teachers' new point of view, or some of the new things coming down that they are aware of. That variability, yes, we know we have to provide different things for different kids at different times, but the variability of tier 1 of what they are learning should not vary. Now, how they do things, we might see some variance based off of student needs and based off of that data. But we need to make sure that what they are doing and what they are learning has some consistency. And we have to do that through a shared curriculum that we're looking at. And that not only works horizontally across a grade level, but vertically from grade to grade to grade to grade. You know, we always see these huge issues a lot of times with kids when they move from like 5th grade to 6th grade, if it's from the elementary to the middle or the middle to the high school. I know for my own personal kids, those were always huge things because it was not just continuing their learning, it was learning a whole new system, a whole new way of doing things. And so the more consistency that we can provide, not even just within a building, but pre-K 12, so that we can all talk that same language. Like Jolene's example of everybody at least now knows what MTSS is and knows what tier 1 and tier 2. That's a great step in moving that direction so that we all can recognize what these resources are. And within those resources, also defining what is it that's required and what if it's nice to have. You know, you might have a really big resource, like for example, you might be using I can't think, well, what are the big box curriculum, like Wonders? But you might also be pulling in UFly. So what parts of Wonders do you want the teacher to have? Do you want them to have to go through the whole thing? Or do you say, you know what, we're going to use this for the vocabulary lessons, and we're going to make sure that we read the stories and ask them the comprehension. But we're not going to do the phonics because that's already addressed in UFly. Okay, and showing them specifically where do we want to be consistent in what's being used. If we don't lay out the expectations, I can present some great resources to a teacher, but they're not going to use them if it's not expected and if we're not checking up on it for accountability. Because again, they're busy and it's not a refusal, but change is hard. And so if we are not helping them with that change, it's not probably going to happen in the way that we want that to happen. So I would like for you to think, and let's discuss for just a minute, of how does your district evaluate instructional resource quality? How do you know what's good or not?
we follow a lot of what OSDE says, that
Mhm.
because we know that you have vetted a lot of resources, and we this year we have started collecting their curriculum. Of course, I'm kind of newer to the district, but we started collecting their pacing guides and their curriculum, and we've noticed some TPT stuff, and so we have
It happens.
put a halt to that. But again, there's some supplemental, like a nice, pretty PowerPoint that could be used. I understand that, but
Sure.
we're finding some of those things that can be um changed and fixed. And so that's kind of what we're doing, is analyzing what the teacher, they've had the autonomy, what they have done. And so we are voicing those concerns and giving them more direction.
Great. Anybody else?
We were really lucky to get this grant, and then we had the tutorship, I guess you could say, or mentorship
Okay.
from one of the heroes. Our hero is Carla Jordan, and she
Oh, Carla's amazing.
yes, so she kind of hinted at things that we might want to look a little bit closer at, and she helped us
Mhm.
build the plan for over here. It's like you were saying, you want parts of Wonders but not all of it, so we're using parts of Into Reading, but we're doing our phonics with Hegarty, and we got really great reading. So we kind of pieced it together with the mentorship of our reading specialist, so we got
Great.
really lucky.
Yeah, I appreciate that the CLSD team and our Heroes field team has been working very closely together to make sure that we are sending out consistent messaging as well. So, okay, well, as we're going this, it's one thing to consider those strong systems. The stronger we make our system, the more we will reduce that instructional variability, and the more opportunities we are giving for every child to receive a quality education, not dependent on their placement that year. So, and that's really our goal right there. Okay, ongoing educator development. Development is part of it. I have been in education for 30 years and I still learn something new every day. And I think everybody else can probably say the same thing. That is really part of our blood, is just we are always learning new things. And it's really what gets me excited every day of, oh, I heard a new podcast. I want to do this. It's when I'm not learning that people are like, are you okay? You're just kind of checking the boxes. Yeah, I need to go listen to something. I need to go learn something new to kind of get on fire again. So that sustained professional learning is going to build that knowledge and capacity necessary for lasting instructional improvement. Now, I know that we probably are all familiar with the studies that say that sitting in a one-off professional development has about a 10% chance of changing instructional practice. And with coaching, which is what you are getting with Tyler and Marlo, or if you're working with one of our heroes or like the SPDIG grant, something along those lines. But that coaching has more of a 90% because it's really looking at that implementation. However, don't discount good quality PD. Good quality professional learning helps to get everyone on the same page, to make sure that everyone's speaking the same language, has the same knowledge base, so that when we get into a coaching situation or a mentorship situation, or I'm going and working on things and coming back to my PLC to hold each other accountable for what we're doing, we all know what is expected and how to get about doing that. And so that's what the professional learning does, is it lays a solid foundation, a solid base. But the more isolated those PD sessions are and not part of that connected system moving across, the less opportunity it has to really affect change. So making sure that we have a plan moving forward, if we're wanting to be able to increase the vocabulary routines in our instruction across all grade levels and in all subject areas, then most of our PD days should incorporate some of those vocabulary routines that we're wanting to address as well, so that we have a through line. Now, obviously, there's always going to be requirements that come down, but there's ways that we can weave that in because we have our talented teachers that do that in their classroom as well. So I would like for you to think and I'm going to connect this one also to our leadership, but our principals included as instructional leaders in literacy learning in your building. And you don't have to respond to this one, but I would like for you to reflect on just a moment. When there is PD dealing with literacy and maybe as a principal not leading it, where is the administrator during that time? There's usually one of three places. They are either in there learning along with their staff and everything has been set aside, or they are in the room, but at the back of the room answering emails because we know how busy our administrators are. I'm not going to deny that at all. Or are they they introduce the speaker and walking out the door and going and dealing with other things?
Our administrator sits in and she is very active. She makes sure that she knows exactly what's going on. She sits in every training and is very, very active. She's in every MTSS meeting. She's in every OCLSD meeting. She goes to every training that we go to. And she's actually in right here with us right now and makes
That's
sure
amazing.
everything that's going on. So kudos to our,
Yay, Delana.
yes,
You know,
we
and
love
that's why when we are having conversations about schools and spotlight schools, Delonaghy does come up because you have a strong leader who is learning right along with your staff and leading by example. And that is a great thing to do. And I do know emergencies pop up. We've got that parent that showed up hot and we've got to go deal with that. Or, you know, there's something happening that just absolutely has to be dealt with. But if it is more the case than not, is it truly an emergency, or do we need to put a system in place that would allow for the administrator to be an active part of that learning more often than not? So with this, that professional learning is what changes systems, but only when it changes practice. And so if we are learning something, also think about how are we following up with this? Did we learn about something? Are we going to be expected to use it in our classroom? How are we going to hold that accountability? Accountability really isn't the bad word that we sometimes make it out to be. I know if I don't have accountability, things go on my back burner every single day. But if somebody doesn't put it on my calendar or say, hey, I'm going to need to talk to you about this in a couple of days, oh, yeah, I need to make sure I make that a priority. And so what are our priorities? How do we hold that accountable so that everyone knows we are all going to go forward on this? So thinking about, you know, hey, we're going to come out with a goal. We have this professional learning. Everyone is going to do this action step, and we're going to talk about it at our PLC next week. And so you've got a week to take care of it. Or here is your exit ticket of what you are going to do and enact this. And then we're going to follow up and make sure that's really happened, or help provide you the support. Not as an I gotcha, but how can I support you in making these changes? It comes easier for some people than others, and some people need to have their hand held across that line, and that's okay. So then we move into practices that work for all students. We know that there are some practices based on evidence that are going to be helpful for all students. They are very critical for some students. Effective literacy systems ensure that every student has access to explicit, systematic, evidence-based instruction within MTSS. There's a lot there in that sentence. First of all, within that MTSS framework, making sure we understand it and where everyone's place is within that. That explicit instruction, I went to school in the 90s where it was a lot of discovery learning that we were all really focused in on. We just need to let kids discover things, and the Socratic method and doing all these wonderful things. And it works when they already have a base knowledge for things to stick to work with. But if we are learning a new concept, we need very explicit instruction. We don't want to discover triangles if we've never been introduced to that terminology and we haven't really been using any of that. Otherwise, we need to be able to say, this is a triangle. It has 3 sides. This is what this looks like, and it can look in a lot of different ways. Then we can go do some discovery around problems involving that. But we need to be able to provide that explicit system And then with the systematic, making sure that everyone across the board is using some of that same terminology. This is even most critical for our students that are struggling or that maybe have a learning disability, because a lot of times their working memory is running on empty. We all have a working memory. It only stores so much. Especially like our students with dyslexia, we know that their working memory is very, very taxed. So the less they are having to remember about, when I am in my classroom, it is be boy is the call word that I recognize that. And when I am in my reading intervention room, it is be bunny. And I've got to remember which is which and which person does what. And having more of those systems across the board helps free up that working memory so that student can actually ingest what we need them to ingest, which is the new content. And so while it seems like small things, it can be really important when it's just taking up that limited space in that working memory. And then having good evidence-based instruction, making sure that what we're using, it doesn't necessarily have to be that specific program, but for example, if I am working with phonemic awareness, I know based on evidence that the sooner I attach those sounds to letters, the better it will be for my students, so that I'm not just working with sounds in isolation for end on time. So making sure that whatever program I'm using, if it doesn't already incorporate that evidence-based piece of that, that I need to make some adjustments with that. And we need to do that within the system. So I would like for you to think about really, how effectively does your system respond when your students are struggling? Do they languish for a while? Do we have kiddos that are staying on a slip from the beginning of kindergarten to the end of third grade? How is it that we jump into action and try to close those gaps?
When I was still in the classroom, this is how it worked.
Okay.
We screened at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Anyone that scored, yellow or red, whatever they were at that time, we were still using dibbles.
Okay.
They went to intervention. The intervention we were using was Voyager Passport.
Yes.
At the time I was still in the classroom, once you were on they didn't even call them slip plans.
It was an APP
plan.
at the time.
Once you were on a RAP plan, you were on a RAP plan the whole year. There was no movement between the tiers. So those children would go to intervention 30 to 40 minutes a day with a person that did that. And then I would have my small groups in my classroom, and I would use, at that time we still had STAR. It gives instructional reports. So I would say, okay, I've got this kid, this kid, this kid in a group. What do they need? And so I would just do whatever that report said. And then the next month I would give STAR again, redo those groups based on their needs. That's how I did it when I was in the classroom. I don't know what everybody else is doing.
How did that work? Do you feel that that was exactly what everyone needed, or did you see some areas that could have been adjusted for improvement?
Both.
Okay,
Both.
fair.
I did some years I would see amazing growth, and then some years I wouldn't. But I felt like it was a good system. I was using the data to drive the instruction. I was giving them what I thought that they needed. I mean, I miss teaching sometimes.
I think we all do. And I think that comes back to, we've had good systems in place. When we have another system, we don't always want to start from ground zero every time. I don't know a system out there that is so bad that we just want to scrap everything. Sometimes we're needing to think about what is valuable, what do we need to keep, and what is it that we might need to adjust. Now, sometimes if you're really trying to do a big overhaul, because of usually it's other issues that are more about personalities or more politically driven, those types of things, the politics within a building. there's sometimes that does have to happen, but the majority of the time we can make tweaks without throwing everybody into a tailspin by throwing everything out. And I do feel like that sometimes it feels like that's what we are doing here at the state sometimes when we've got all the legislation coming. And so I think it's really one of the things we're trying to point out is the things that are actually staying the same and the things that are actually different, and so that we can build upon that base that we have. So when we're talking about practices that work, that strong tier 1 instruction is the foundation of a healthy literacy system. I don't know how much we can preach that. We talk about it all the time. If you are focusing, if your first thought of how are we going to improve reading in our school is about intervention, that is kind of a bit of a red flag. Our first thought needs to be, is tier 1 where it needs to be? If we have a lot of kids showing up on that screener below that grade level target, then yes, we need to get intervention in for those kids to close the gap. But at the same time, what is going on that we have so many kids already demonstrating risk? And is there something that we can adjust to address that? Sometimes there are things outside of our control, but a lot of times there are things that we can react to help address that. It's kind of like when I think it's Desmond Tutu that talks about, rather than pulling the kids out of the river, we need to go up the river to see why they're falling in the first place. And that's what the tier 1 is. It's preventing the kids from falling into the river so that we're not having to pull them out downstream. Okay, evidence-based decisions. Coming back to this, because I know, oh my goodness, we talk about it all the time. Those data-driven systems use assessment information to guide instruction, intervention, and continuous improvement. And all you have to do is spend 2 minutes on social media to see, oh, we're having to test again, all this. We just finished testing season. I get it. It is tough. And sometimes that system is not connected the way it needs to be, because we'll see, okay, I'm giving this test and this test and this test and this test. The reality is that there's not one test out there that will take care of everything. We know that. A screener is meant to demonstrate risk. A screener will not help determine who has mastered this year's learning objectives. There has to be 2 different assessments for that, a screener and a mastery assessment. But if we and our teachers are not seeing how one informs the other and how they work together to help drive that system, then we are doing our teachers a disservice because they are not seeing that connection to the system. So for this, I want you to consider, first of all, can your educators explain how data influences instructional planning in your building? Can educators explain how data influences instructional planning? And that may be one we think on for a little bit. Sometimes when we don't have the answers, it's kind of an answer in and of itself that maybe this is not an area where we're comfortable quite yet. And so this could be an area of a goal as we're moving into this next school year, especially we're talking about our upcoming professional learning plan. Maybe we need to start at identifying the different types of data we collect, not just test data, but behavioral data and attendance data, and putting that together and making the connections so that our teachers can understand why it's important and how we do it, and not just an exercise of checking the boxes. Okay? So that data, we need to use data to inform action, not just simply for reporting, but how are we going to make those changes? And finally, our last pillar within PROPEL is the lasting family and community partnerships. And I know when I am reflecting at the state level with this plan and the work we are working with literacy, I will say this is our weakest pillar that we have at the state level, is really working on, and one that we're really actively trying to help strengthen. But that literacy improvement is really strengthened when families and communities understand, support, and participate in the work. You know, we saw some of that with this last legislative season where we saw some of the business community trying to really have an impact. We may not have agreed with their method of going about that. However, the fact that they are trying to work and understand where they might need some coaching on how that effective support can look might be happening. But the fact that we are seeing that we are not just an isolated system. Everything that we do in education is affecting our community as a whole. We know that the students that are leaving our buildings, if they are not literate, and I just know the statistics for literacy, we are seeing increased crime because we have so many fewer options available to us when we cannot read. We're seeing more health issues because we don't know how to do preventative care or being able to access preventative care, or sometimes being able to understand and read the directions being given by our healthcare providers. We are seeing a lower economic growth in our state when we have a high rate of low reading ability because of our earning potential is decreased when we are at that. So there's a lot of components that this affects our state, our community beyond just the K-12 system. And sometimes it can get a little overwhelming to think about where we fit in that, but I think it also helps to ground us that this is not just, I just need to get them through to graduation. I'll confess, I had my middle child graduated on Friday night, and that's really where I was. I just need to get this child out of high school so that I can breathe again. However, I do know that she has life beyond this. We're just giving her a couple of weeks. And then it's okay, we're back at it again. How are you going to be a productive member of society? So that's the same thing that we are also trying to work with our students. So that literacy plan really is why it is essential that this needs to be visible beyond just our district leadership meeting or beyond our staff meetings, but how can we pull that within our community? So I would like for you to think, how visible is literacy work within your community? And thinking beyond families, what about community partners? Do we have local libraries that we partner with? Is there maybe a restaurant that partners with us on giving a local a night and recognition of those that have been meeting a reading goal? It's just additional summer activity. We have a lot of faith-based organizations that provide after-school tutoring or summer tutoring as well, summer reading camps that we can partner with. Of how can we support one another on this? And sometimes it's beyond the, I know in the building I was in, a lot of times it was, what can you do for us was more the mentality rather than how can we make this a reciprocal partnership?
So
Okay,
I
I'm
know
going to keep this. Go ahead, Ginger.
Sorry, I was just going to say in Muskogee, we are fortunate enough to have enough. Some of the elementary schools have actual volunteers that come in and help support literacy within the schools.
Yeah.
Probably one of our biggest partners is with as the William Berry Love Foundation. They actually provided the funding for us to be able to have 10 interventionists provided across our district. So that's been one of the areas that we have seen that has really increased our literacy skills across the district. And without them, we wouldn't have been able to have a budget that would have allowed for 10 additional interventionists.
That is amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. So, another example of how we can learn from one another on how to do that. Okay, I know that we are 1 minute past time. I apologize, Emily. You know I like to talk. So I will obviously make sure that Emily has access to these slides so that you can share them. But I'm just going to quickly speed through as we're looking at that data story, making sure that that data helps to inform our priorities. Those priorities should define our actions, and the actions should lead to the outcomes that we want. Making sure that we have that very obvious and there, and we can do that without putting out student information, without trying to make anyone feel bad about it, but we do need to make sure it's visible for it. So I would like for you to consider, as we are moving on, is what is one literacy data point that your district should make more visible? Things like, is it based on the screener, dyslexia identification, intervention outcomes like rate of growth, who is improving from one tier to the next? OSTP could be one. I know that one is there a lot. It doesn't necessarily inform what we do on a daily basis. Maybe it's professional learning participation. We've got some different ways that people are learning. So some things as you are reflecting on as you move forward is, what is the message that your plan communicates? Are your initiatives clearly connected, or are they operating separately? Can educators explain your district's literacy priorities? How visible is your vision in your community? And does your data clearly connect to your goals? Our goal really is here coherence. The strongest literacy plans are not the longest documents. They are the clearest expression of a district's beliefs, priorities, and directions. That does not have to be a 5-paragraph essay. It does not have to be a 20-page plan. It might be something that's very simple, but we need to make sure that it is clear for people. Keep coming back to your local literacy plan really is your district's literacy identity. How do you want to be seen as a literacy district? That should be defined in your plan, and that should also be acted out based on that plan. So as you are moving forward, it's really important to make sure you have identified your clearest literacy priorities, align those goals to those PROPEL pillars as you are working on your local plans, and then making that connection between data and action explicit. We say that we need to have this program. Why? Based on what data? And how are we going to know if it's being effective or not? Just some thoughts of some of these themes that we've been talking about. That coherence over compliance. If we're just checking boxes, we'll check the boxes, but we are not going to make movement on where we need to be. Having alignment over isolated initiatives. Alignment helps make the work so much easier. It makes it lighter because we can understand how things play into one another. Having a visibility of priorities so that everyone knows what they are and how we're working towards them. That literacy identity, data connected to our decisions, and leadership really does create sustainability. And that is probably the most important thought I would like to leave you with. You matter as a leader in your school, in your district. If you are not there, if you are not leading the way, they are not going to do it on their own. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not the title that makes the leader, it's their actions. And so sometimes it's the principal, sometimes it's the lead teacher, sometimes it's the reading specialist. If a principal has abdicated their leadership to that person, if they're always pointing to that person, this is the leader in our building, this is the literacy person in our building, I don't know anything, that then they're abdicating their authority with that. And is that really what we want to happen in your district? That's a personal reflection on that. So, okay, Emily, thank you so much. And again, I apologize. I only went 5 minutes over, which is kind of good for me, but not great for you. I apologize. So.
Melissa, this was a great day of learning about PROPEL, but then also sharing, Tyler and I were kind of messaging back and forth that some great conversation. Really appreciate the candor and openness from our districts to share out and really use today to learn and reflect. So we very much appreciate your time. I can notice a bit of a calm over everyone. It must mean that all the students are gone for summer. So I do want to thank you again for coming today, and especially a thank you to Melissa for really laying the groundwork for us and having such a great state plan to lead and guide from. I strongly encourage you, as you think about what you learned today and what your takeaways are, to reflect on who's coming to the June 9th retreat with you, and ensure that the people who can have the loudest voices, the most impact on how your district's literacy vision is crafted through it is a part of the June 9th retreat. So if you take a look at that and reflect on your registration and say it'd really benefit to have this person, or if you know they can't come, meet with them beforehand to get their input, to make sure that as you're crafting it through the 6 pillars of, I think it's 6, I haven't 7 pillar of PROPEL, that you have the necessary insight to make sure that what you're crafting for your district has that sustainability piece in it, because we do know that we want to make sure that long after the grant you have things in place and that the grant has helped you to establish those MTSS systems, those workflow systems to navigate literacy outcomes for all your students. So today was a great COP. I really appreciate the 11 districts that have gotten on. I appreciate the time that you dedicate and commit to the grant. And I hope you see where it is aligning and how hard we're working to align a lot of what we're requiring you with with the State Department's vision, so that when we are gone, you are positioned to be in alignment with a lot of those legislative mandates and have systems in place that help support your students. Please know that our grant team is here for all of your needs. Like, we want to partner with you. We want to make life easier for you. We do want to make sure, I know I see your face, Ginger, sometimes. It's like, it doesn't feel like it with all the work, but what you're doing now, what you're doing today, the efforts you're putting in are going to make tomorrow easier, hopefully. That is the plan. We're taking a lot of what we're hearing and learning here and trying to craft it to fit the grant needs and the grant goals with what we know you're going to have to do anyway. So it's almost like you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And so always ask us why we're doing things. If you're not sure, partner with us to help to get staff buy-in. Know that Tyler is here and Marlo is here, and I am here for professional development needs, whether it be with the MTSS lens or a literacy lens. And Paige is running operations pretty seamlessly. So I know we're about 10 minutes late. I do apologize, but it's so great to connect with you guys. It's hard being so far away, and I'm like a relational person. So like the human element, the human connection is so great for me. So always good to see you guys, and know that you are never bothering us. People are like, well, we didn't want to bother you. That's what we're here for. So bother us, call us, email us, text me if you've got my number. If you want my number, ask me for it. I don't have a lot of boundaries, and so I am happy to help you guys wherever I can. So have a great summer, and hopefully we will see almost all of you or many of you on June 9th. Have a great day. Hi, Tiffany.